The lathe consists of 3 parts. The first part that we'll talk about is the head. The items that will pertain to you will be the red on-off switch, the RPM adjustment knob, the RPM readout, the digital readout or DRO, the spindle gear lever, and finally the spindle/chuck. The second part is called the carriage. Familiarize yourself with the tool post, the X and Z hand wheels, and the spindle on-off lever. The third part is called the tailstock. The tailstock consists of the quill digital readout, quill lock, the tailstock lock, and the quill hand wheel.
Open the bottom drawer using the latch on the side. All the tools you'll need are in this drawer, so leave it open. Using the Intro to Machining cutting tool, load it into the tool post and lock it down.
There are 3 ways to measure with the caliper. The bigger jaws are used to measure the outside of things. The smaller pointier jaws are used to measure the inside of things. And at the other end of the caliper, the blade is used to measure the depth. You'll need to clean the jaws of the caliper before measuring. Place a piece of paper between the jaws and close them together using the thumb screw. Now remove the paper. Keep the jaws closed using the thumb screw and press 0. The caliper is now clean and calibrated. It is always a good idea to measure your stock before placing it in the chuck. Measure the diameter of your stock to make sure it's at least 1 inch as it calls for on the drawing. Write this dimension down on your drawing. Measure the length of your stock and compare that to the finished length of the part on your drawing. You want to make sure the stock is long enough to make a good part. You are responsible for making sure the stock is correct before machining. Make sure the lathe is turned off with the red e-stop switch pushed in. Use a rag to wipe the jaws clean of any oil and debris. When you are finished with the rag, place it in the toolbox. Please do not leave rags lying on the machines. Now place your stock inside the jaws of the chuck. Leave approximately 1.5 inches of stock sticking out away from the jaws. You can use your steel rule provided to help check this measurement. Use the chuck wrench located at the lathe to secure the stock in the chuck. Start by tightening the master key labeled with a 0. Press the key wrench down until it locates into the square key on the chuck. Turn the T-handle wrench clockwise to tighten. Rotate the chuck and tighten the other 2 keys. Before turning on the lathe, you will need to put the spindle gear lever in the correct position. We will be running the spindle at 1000 RPM, so it will need to be in high gear. When putting the lever into gear, rotate the chuck to allow the gears to mesh. If the gears are not fully engaged, it will create a grinding noise when you turn the spindle on. See staff if you have any questions. Now turn the e-stop switch to start the machine. You'll notice the RPM display gauge will light up. To start the spindle, pull up on the spindle lever on the back of the carrot. The spindle should be rotating counterclockwise, which is the correct rotation for turning. If you push the spindle lever all the way down, the chuck will rotate clockwise. You will never use the lathe with the chuck rotating clockwise, so please do not push the lever all the way down. Turn off the spindle, just push the lever down with your open hand, and the lever will go to the neutral position. Turn the power on to the lathe and turn the RPM adjustment dial down. Start the spindle by pulling up on the spindle on-off lever located at the back of the carriage. This will ensure counterclockwise rotation. Turn the RPM adjustment knob until the RPM readout reads approximately 1000 RPMs. Using the X and Z handwheels on the carriage, position the tip of the tool toward the outside edge of the face of the part. Now lightly touch the tip of the tool to the face of the part. Move the tool off the face of the part by using the X handwheel. Shut off the spindle and zero the Z axis on the DRO. Move the Z axis handwheel until the DRO reads -0.015 in the Z. Zero the Z axis again. Turn on the spindle and use the X handwheel to feed the tool toward the center of the part to remove stock off the face. Once the stock has been removed, turn the X handwheel counterclockwise to return the tool back to the position where you started. If the face is cleaned up, 0 is set. If it is not, repeat the process until it is. Turn on the spindle. Now bring the tip of the tool to the outside edge of the stock. Use the X handwheel to lightly touch the tool to the outside of the part. Use the Z handwheel to move the tool off the part. Do not move the X at this time. Shut the spindle off. Press the arrow next to the X on the DRO. Now enter the outside diameter measurement you wrote down on your drawing after measuring your stock. Now the tip of the tool is set at the diameter you just touched off on in the X-axis. Make sure the tool is clear from the part. Take 30 thou cuts off on the outside diameter at one time. In this case, I'll turn the X handwheel so the DRO reads .980. Add cutting fluid to the part and tool for each pass. Turn on the spindle and feed the Z handwheel slowly until the Z axis reads -0.740. This will leave finished stock for the shoulder on the last pass. Move the tool straight back with the Z handwheel and shut off the spindle. Shut off the machine and measure the diameter of the part with your caliper. Compare the measurement to the DRO in the X-axis. If it is off by 5 thousandths or more, set the DRO to your caliper measurement. Continue turning the OD of the part at 30 thousandths per pass until the DRO in the X-axis is at .77. Shut off the machine and measure the diameter before making the finish pass. Make sure the DRO and caliper are reading the same. Move the X handwheel so the DRO reads .750 in the X-axis. Add cutting oil and start the spindle. Now slowly feed the Z handwheel until the DRO reads -0.750 in the Z-axis. Note, the slower the feed, the better the finish. Once the Z is set at -0.750, slowly move the X handwheel counterclockwise. This will remove the stock on the shoulder left for finishing. Shut off the machine and measure the diameter and the length of the boss with the caliper.
After machining is complete, remove the cutting tool from the tool post. This prevents accidental damage to your part or the chuck. Load the keyless chuck into the tailstock. Take note of the orientation as it may require some adjusting. Now load the spot drill into the chuck. Ensure to tighten it down. Slide the tailstock forward and lock it down. Turn on the digital readout. Lightly touch the spot drill to the face of the part and zero the readout. With the spot drill away from the part, turn on the spindle to 1000 RPM. Use the spot drill to drill down to a depth of 50 thousandths. Shut off the spindle and pull the tailstock away from the part. Remove the spot drill and prepare for drilling. First, use calipers to measure the diameter of the drill. We are using a number 7 drill, which should be 0.201. Load the drill into the chuck and ensure it's tightened all the way. Slide the tailstock forward and lock it down. Lightly touch the drill to the front of the part and zero the readout. Add some oil onto the drill and start the spindle to 1000 RPM. We will use a technique called peck drilling, which means taking small cuts at a time and backing off the drill. Keep drilling until you reach 0.7. Once the depth will back the drill out, pull the tailstock back and remove the drill.
Mount the countersink into the keyless chuck with the flute facing toward you. This will allow you to see the chip being formed when chamfering. Turn on the spindle and turn the RPM adjustment dial down until the RPM readout displays 300. Move the tailstock close to the workpiece and lock the tailstock into place. Place cutting oil on the countersink before chamfering. Use the quill hand wheel to feed the countersink into the part until a burr is removed and a chamfer is created. Shut off the spindle and move the tailstock away from the part. Remove the countersink from the keyless chuck. Press the red button to turn the lathe off. Grab the tap and tap handle. Place the square end of the tap into the tap handle with the corners locating in the V-jaws. Secure the tap by tightening the collar of the tap handle, as you would a keyless chuck. Take the dead center and secure it in the keyless chuck on the tailstock. Locate the lead of the tap in the hole, with the tap handle toward the tailstock. Move the tailstock closer to the work and lock the tailstock. Use the quill hand wheel to locate the dead center into the drilled center of the tap handle. Add cutting oil to the tap. Now turn the tap handle clockwise to create threads and follow with the dead center by turning the quill handle. Do 3 half turns clockwise, then 1 half turn counterclockwise to break the chip. When you do the half turn counterclockwise, take pressure off the tap handle by retracting the quill handle so the tap has room to move back. Failing to do so could result in threads being stripped or the tap breaking. Continue this process until you feel the tap reach the bottom of the hole. At this point, stop and remove the tap from the hole. Use a rag to cover the hole and blow the chips out with an air hose. Take the thread gauge and thread it into the hole. If the nut on the thread gauge bottoms out on the face of the part, the threads are good. If the gauge does not screw in all the way, repeat the tapping process. Blowing the chips out of the hole will allow the tap to go in a little further to create a couple more threads. Once that's done, check the gauge again. If the gauge still doesn't bottom out, you will have to put the drill back in and drill the hole a little deeper. Then repeat the tapping process.
Turn on the machine and start the spindle to 300 RPM. With the carriage moved away from the chuck, hold the file in two hands. Using a forward motion, hold the file on a 45-degree angle to the edge. Continue this motion for all edges.
Now it's time for cleanup. First, remove any tool from the keyless chuck if you haven't already. Now return the tailstock to the end of the lathe. Remove the keyless chuck and place it back into the toolbox. Shut off the digital scale on the tailstock. Shut off the machine by pressing the e-stop switch. Move the carriage back toward the tailstock. Remove your part from the chuck using the key wrench. Brush all the chips down into the chip pan below, using the white-handled brush located in the toolbox. Use a rag to finish wiping down the lathe of any small chips or oil that's left behind. We take pride in the cleanliness of the shop, so the machine/workstation must be as clean or cleaner as when you started. Remove the chips from the chip pan using a hand brush and dustpan located in the designated areas of the shop. Place the chips from the chip pan in the bins labeled metal only. Make sure your machine is clean and the tools are put away in order. Before you leave, you must have staff check your machine and workstation. Now you are ready for the mill.